Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam from Historic Travels and welcome to another video. And as always, before we get started today, I'd just like to take a quick moment to welcome all my new subs and to thank everybody who's been leaving me comments and messages down below. Thank you guys so much, I really appreciate it. And if you would like to take a couple extra steps to help support the channel a little bit more, there's a merch store and a Patreon for this channel in the links below. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Okay guys, so before we begin today's video, I do have one quick thing I need to say. For all of you out there who are wondering when the last episode of the Mary Celeste series is going to come out, I'm planning to release that video probably this Friday or Saturday, so just stand by for that. But before we do that, I found another incredible story from the sinking of the RMS Titanic that I wanted to share with you guys. What I discovered was a story of two men who were friends on board the Titanic throughout its maiden voyage. And these two men worked together to try to escape the Titanic before she sank. And they barely, I mean just barely, managed to escape this ship during the ship's final minutes. I mean, honestly, their story of survival is one of the most incredible stories that I've ever come across when studying the story of the Titanic, and I really wanted to share it with you guys. Alright guys, well hey, without any further ado, let's begin the tale. On the night of April the 14th, 1912, as the RMS Titanic was steaming across the Atlantic Ocean, two friends were enjoying a pleasant evening in the Titanic's first-class smoking room. First-class passenger Hugh Woolner, along with his friend who was also in first class, Mauritz Steffansson, were enjoying the evening in the Titanic's first-class smoking room, just having pleasant conversation, enjoying the drinks available, and just enjoying the maiden voyage of the Titanic. When, at 11:40 p.m., the RMS Titanic struck the iceberg on the starboard side below the waterline and slowly began to sink. Now, both of these men at first weren't aware of the actual collision with the iceberg, but both men knew something had happened at 11:40 p.m. Woolner decided to get up and go investigate what was the source of the slight vibration that they felt in the smoking room, while Steffansson decided to remain in the first-class smoking room for the time being. Upon leaving the smoking room, Woolner decided to head up to the Titanic's A-deck promenade and look out the window there to see if he could spot anything that may be responsible for the slight vibration he felt in the smoking room. He didn't see anything, but he did hear one man talk about the ship hitting an iceberg. So after hearing this, Woolner headed back inside the Titanic to go seek out another friend of his, Miss Candy, and he found her outside of her stateroom. Now, Woolner explained to Candy that something was up with the ship and asked her if she would like to accompany him, and then the two of them would just walk around the boat deck for a while and see what was going on. But Woolner didn't think it was anything serious. The two of them did this, and then after some time, they noticed some people inside the Titanic wearing life jackets, and then slowly but surely, he saw these people begin to come out onto the boat deck. At this point, he thought something more serious must be wrong with the vessel, so they decided to investigate further. Now, while Woolner and Candy were investigating on the Titanic's boat deck, Steffansson was still relaxing in the first-class smoking room. And honestly, he was still enjoying the evening, and he knew nothing about how serious of a situation they were in until finally one of the Titanic's officers came into the smoking room, saw him sitting there, and basically scolded him. He's like, "What are you doing? There's an emergency situation going on. Get to your cabin, get a life jacket, and head up to the boat deck immediately." So Stefan did what he was told, went back to his room, got a life jacket, and then proceeded up to the boat deck. Now, even after he did this, though, it would still be another hour or so before him and Woolner would eventually meet up again. After some time had passed, Woolner and Candy were successful in finding a member of the Titanic's crew, and they asked this crew member as to why all the passengers were wearing life jackets. This crew member told them that an order had been given out that all passengers should wear life jackets and stay on the boat deck. So at this point, Candy and Woolner both went back to their rooms, retrieved their life jackets, and then came back up on the boat deck and continued to look around for further instructions. Eventually, they came across Captain Smith, and they asked the captain what they should do. Captain Smith told both of them to proceed to the A-deck promenade, and then the lifeboats were going to be lowered down to that area, and then they would climb through the Titanic's windows and board a lifeboat from there. You see, when Woolner heard this order from the captain, he was aware of a problem with the captain's plan that it was quite possible that Captain Smith wasn't even aware of at this time. You see, what Captain Smith wanted everybody to do was basically to proceed down to this part of the Titanic's deck. The area right above my finger, this is the A-deck promenade. And Captain Smith wanted the Titanic's passengers to come down here and wait. They would lower the lifeboats down to right here. The passengers would climb through this area and then board the Titanic's lifeboats. That was the captain's plan. Now, this order would work fine on the back part of the Titanic's A-deck promenade because this area is open. However, in this area right here, all of these windows you see here have glass in them. Now, it was possible to open up these windows, but it was a very slow and very time-consuming task, and it required a special tool in order to do so. Basically, what they needed this special type of crank, and this crank wasn't connected to the wall underneath the window. It was basically a removable tool that the Titanic's crew could go and get. They pick up the crank, take it to the window, plug it in underneath the window in a special slot, then they turn this crank and it slowly but surely opens up the window. As I said, this is a very slow and very time-consuming task, and you've got to have this special tool in order to open these windows. Now, Woolner noticed, because he actually passed the A-deck promenade when he was coming back up to the boat deck after retrieving his life jacket from his stateroom, and he noticed that all of these windows were still closed. So he informed the captain of this problem. Captain Smith thanked him, and then he went and told all of the passengers on the A-deck promenade to come back up to the boat deck where they would board lifeboats from there. Man, can you imagine how much time this saved? Because if Woolner hadn't told the captain about this, he may have already lowered the lifeboats down to the A-deck promenade, only to see that all the windows were shut, and then the crew would either have to go and get that tool to open the windows before they could load the lifeboats, or if they didn't want to do that, they'd have to hoist the lifeboats back up to the boat deck before passengers could begin boarding the lifeboats. I mean, honestly, that could have really delayed the launching of the Titanic's lifeboats. Now, I also heard a rumor that they lost this tool that they need to open up those windows on the A-deck promenade. However, it does seem like that this tool was eventually found, and they were able to get some of the windows open towards the end of the sinking. I believe lifeboat number 4 was launched through those A-deck promenade windows. But still, you see my point. It was very fortunate that Woolner was there to let the captain know about the problem with his plan. Otherwise, it's quite possible not all of the lifeboats would have been able to escape the Titanic before the ship went down. Now, after the whole situation with the A-deck promenade windows, Woolner and Candy made their way over to lifeboat number 6. This lifeboat would be getting ready to leave the Titanic before long. Lifeboat number 6 would leave the Titanic at precisely... wait a minute. I can't remember what time lifeboat number 6 left the Titanic. Hang on a second. I've got to check something. Alright, so now we know that lifeboat number 6 left the Titanic at 1:10 a.m., and Woolner was determined to make sure that Candy would have a place in this lifeboat, and if possible, he would like to try to escape the ship in this lifeboat as well. Now, Woolner was successful in getting Candy into this lifeboat, however, he was not allowed to get into this boat. Now, at lifeboat number 6, Woolner also made contact with his friend Steffansson, who was also hanging out in that area. So, with Candy successfully off the Titanic, the two friends decide to work together to see if they can escape the Titanic together. Now, right around the same time that Woolner was helping Candy get into lifeboat number 6, he happened to be standing right beside lifeboat number 8, because lifeboat number 6 and lifeboat number 8 were basically sitting beside each other on the deck of the Titanic. And lifeboat number 8 is the area at which Isidore and Ida Strauss were arguing with each other. Isidore was trying to convince his wife Ida to get into a lifeboat, and she completely refused to leave her husband. She said, "No, where you go, I go. Don't argue with me, Isidore." Now, upon hearing this, Woolner went over to Isidore Strauss and said to him, "Sir, I really don't think anybody would mind if you took a spot in a lifeboat. There may be room in this lifeboat," and I'm assuming he was pointing at lifeboat number 8. And Isidore said, "No, I will not leave before the other men." So I want you to think about this for a second. It's because of Woolner's testimony we know about this exchange between Isidore and Ida Strauss. We now know who saw this event with these two people, and now you all know why we know about this famous event from Isidore and Ida Strauss. That's really crazy to me, because I didn't know that it was Woolner who saw this event between these two people, and it's because of him we know about this exchange between Isidore and his wife Ida. After Woolner had successfully got Candy away from the Titanic in lifeboat number 6, He, along with his friend Steffansson, headed to the front part of the Titanic's boat deck to see if they could catch one of the last two lifeboats to leave the Titanic and get off of the ship that way. The two men hung around Collapsible D for a while on the Titanic's port side, and then they heard what sounded like gunshots coming from the Titanic's starboard side. They head over to see Murdoch firing warning shots into the air as a crowd of men tries to swamp Collapsible C. Upon seeing this, Woolner says to his friend Steffansson, "There's nothing else we can do here, let's try to find another means to escape the ship." The two men then proceed one deck down to the A-deck promenade to see if they can find any means to escape the Titanic from this deck. When Woolner and Steffansson entered the A-deck promenade, they found the deck to be entirely deserted. So while the two men were walking around on this deck, they were trying to decide how they were going to even attempt to survive the sinking of the Titanic. Woolner said to his friend, "This is looking to be a very tight corner for us, and I do not like being around these enclosed promenade windows." He was referring to the glass windows at the front of the Titanic's A-deck promenade that we spoke of earlier. He also noticed that the lights on the Titanic were beginning to glow a reddish color as the ship was rapidly losing power. This happened roughly at 2:05, 2:06 a.m. Don't forget, the Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m., so both men are rapidly losing time, and it won't be very long before the Titanic sinks and the two men are stranded in the water after the ship goes down. The two men decide to head towards the front of the Titanic, still on the A-deck promenade, when they notice their one and only shot to get off the Titanic before it sinks. The two men know that if they do not take this one last opportunity to escape the ship, then they will be trapped on board the Titanic when she founders. What the two men saw that they knew was their last chance to get off of the Titanic before it sank was the last lifeboat to leave the Titanic currently pulling away from the ship. That lifeboat was Collapsible D, positioned at the very front of the ship on the port side. Now, when they saw this lifeboat, the water was right at the A-deck promenade level and was getting ready to spill over this railing right here and flood the A-deck promenade. So literally, they had seconds before this happened. The two men were walking down the deck right here past the glass windows, and they see Collapsible D floating right around this area right here. They see the boat beginning to pull away. Now this spot right here on the A-deck promenade, this is open space. There's no glass here. So the two men do the only thing they can do. They walk out onto this part of the Titanic's A-deck promenade. And when they did this, water was already beginning to spill over these railings and was beginning to flood the A-deck promenade. So they walked out onto a submerged part of the Titanic's deck and literally just climbed into Collapsible D, just as that part of the Titanic was beginning to rapidly sink. Now, believe it or not, you can actually watch the escape of Woolner and Steffansson from the Titanic in the latest real-time sinking animation by Tom Linsky over at his YouTube channel, Part-Time Explorer. And I would like to take a moment to thank him and his team for letting me use his Titanic animation in my videos. Thanks a lot, Tom. But yeah, in the clip you are watching, you are actually about to see Woolner and Steffansson escape the Titanic and climb into Collapsible D. Hang on a second and I'll pause the video so you can see where the two men currently are on the Titanic. There they are. You can just make out the two men standing there inside the A-deck promenade window, heading towards the front of the Titanic to try to climb over the railing and get inside Collapsible D. And then they go for it. If you watch this video very carefully, you can see the two men jump over the A-deck railing and jump into Collapsible D and get away from the Titanic. Now, in case you're wondering if they were putting this boat in danger by them jumping into this lifeboat, well, they weren't in the slightest. There were plenty of empty seats in Collapsible D when the two men jumped in. At the time that they got into the lifeboat, there was around 19 people on this lifeboat, and this lifeboat had a capacity for 49 people. So there was more than enough room for these two men to attempt to escape the Titanic in Collapsible D. And the two men were successful in just barely catching the last lifeboat to leave the Titanic before the ship submerged. Now you're probably thinking, that's it, right? The two men made it into Collapsible D, so now they're safe from the sinking of the Titanic. What else could happen to them? Well, they didn't know it at the time, but they actually had one more hurdle to overcome. And honestly, they overcame this hurdle without either of them even realizing it. What Woolner and Steffansson didn't realize when they jumped into Collapsible D is that up on the Titanic's boat deck, Second Officer Charles Lightoller, who throughout the entire evening had been adamant about no men in any of his lifeboats, saw Woolner and Steffansson leap from the promenade deck and into Collapsible D. And believe it or not, when he saw this, Lightoller had the temptation for some stupid reason to go down and order these two men out of that lifeboat. Are you kidding me? What are you thinking, Lightoller? It's 2:10 a.m. The final plunge of the Titanic is about to begin. There's more than enough room in Collapsible D for both Woolner and Steffansson. There is no reason for you to order those two men out of that lifeboat. But anyway, now that I've raged for a moment, Lightoller did consider going down to order Woolner and Steffansson out of that boat, but he thought about it for a moment, saw how fast the Titanic was sinking, so he ultimately did decide to let the two men go. However, I still can't believe that he would even consider ordering those two men out at this late stage in the sinking, and considering how many empty seats were available in Collapsible D. And then, just 10 minutes after Woolner and Steffansson made it off the Titanic, the ship's power went out, the Titanic broke in half, and slowly but surely sank beneath the surface. And man, that just goes to show how close Woolner and Steffansson came to being trapped on the Titanic when she sank. If those two men hadn't leapt into Collapsible D when they did, it's most likely that they would have been another one of the many victims who lost their lives when the RMS Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, 1912. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. And yeah, now you know one of the most incredible survival stories from the Titanic disaster. You now know how Woolner and his friend Steffansson escaped the ship before she went down. And boy, let me tell you guys, I wasn't even aware of how crazy of a survival story those two guys had before I began researching it for this video. And in my opinion, their story should definitely be more well known, and I think their names should be better remembered among all those in the Titanic community. Anyway guys, thank you all so much for watching. You guys keep doing what you're doing. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys so much for all the support. All right, everybody. Well, hey, y'all stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day, everybody. Special thanks to our Captain level Patreon supporters, Greg Gallick and Callum Whaley. Thank you guys so much for all the support.